guess I'll start. Hello,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us today for our Design with Conscience webinar, Speaking to Humanitarianism in Architecture. I'm Michelle D. Haven, one of the principals here at Function, and I'll be your moderator today. While sustainability was once considered a trend in the AEC industry, it is quickly becoming the norm. Today, sustainability is evolving and including a responsibility to the environment and humanity as a whole. As design focus continues to shift from elaborate to purposeful, architects, designers, marketers, and building product manufacturers are seeking to understand where the movement is headed and how they can effectively communicate their projects and products. Today's webinar will shed light on this advance towards humanitarianism in architecture. Again, thank you for joining us to discuss this progression toward social responsibility and its effect on the industry. At any time throughout this webinar, feel free to send questions or to follow us on Twitter at Function Atlanta. At this point, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts for this edition of Function's Construct Knowledge Series. Starting with Barb Alvarado, Director of Development with Architecture for Humanity. Barb joined Architecture for Humanity in 2008. As Development Director, Barb coordinates, organizes, and implements fundraising and sponsorship campaigns and activities for Architecture for Humanity's programs. Originally from Mexico City, Barb is an architectural graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Thanks for joining us today, Barb.
Thank you for having me.
Next, I'd like to introduce Susan Sinesi, Editor-in-Chief of Metropolis Magazine, the award-winning New York City-based magazine of architecture, culture, and design. Since 1986, she has led the magazine through 24 years of landmark design journalism, achieving international recognition and winning numerous awards. Believing that design and architecture are humanist activities, Susan is committed to education. She is a frequent lecturer and panel moderator on broad-ranging design topics and the leader behind Metropolis's various design conferences. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Susan.
Happy to be here.
And finally, Dana Castle, Principal and Director of Strategy of Function. Dana is responsible for strategic planning at Function and Function Consulting Group. Dana's industry expertise drives top-level campaigns ranging from brand management and influencer relation plans to sales channel and distributor communication programs. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From here, let's get started and jump right in. To start with, how does humanitarian design differ from general community service practices? Barb, can you offer some insight here?
Yeah, well, I think that this is something that's still evolving, but we're seeing it more and more in the practice. And I think that the basic difference is that it's now more about change within the communities and not just charity, whereas before you might do some community service to help, you know, some poor people somewhere. Now it's more about a partnership, and it's really kind of including those clients in the process and making those connections and making sure that the community as a whole is involved, and it's not just people coming from the outside doing a project and leaving. And I think also the environment is something that you know, we're seeing more as a concern, and it's just being included in this.
Okay, so partnering with the community and making efforts to make it a sustainable environment for the future.
Right.
And Susan, can you add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that it's a really interesting time at this time because designers are actually looking to expand their practices, and it used to be that the design community was interested in the large corporate areas of activity, and sort of the good design was a trickle-down affair where you know, if you worked in a great office and you made a little money, you still benefited from great design. But I think people are looking at design in a much different way now. Is that there's a larger constituency, a larger consumer group, a larger user group for design services and design projects and products that perhaps cannot afford it or can afford little, but brings a great deal of understanding of societal issues and cultural significance to the designers' understanding of their market. So I think it sort of comes from the bottom up, the top down, sideways, and all ways, because it's not just doing good, but doing good design for a lot more people than you have ever done before.
Oh, that's a very good point. Very interesting. Thank you. Next, I'd like to ask, Dana, I'd like to start with you on this. Do you feel that building trends often come from a change in market demand or vice versa?
I always think that trends come, there's always a need, out of trends, and I think the need can come from a change in the economy or this trend from market conditions or emotional needs, and it kind of goes along with what Barb and Susan are saying. The funny thing I think about when we call this a trend, and I was talking to an architect the other day, and he says, well, this has been around forever. So maybe it's the trends part is the conversation around it. I think maybe the movement. Yeah, I mean, so it has been around, they've been doing things like this. And I think the movement around humanitarianism in architecture, came from all of these. Maybe it came from less projects for architects to work on right now. Architects I know they all like to feed their soul. So the need, just the basic of human need here. We need buildings designed that fit into other environments such as, still poverty or violence-stricken areas or, migrating populations. And, but good design belongs there too. And so, I see this all fitting together. And this is very different from creating a beautiful structure in a major metropolitan area, and this is much more complex, but it has good substance to it, and I would guess that architects find this interesting and challenging and fulfilling. So I think that's where it came from.
This is Susan, I'd like to add to this the historic connection, because I think everybody does talk about this. Designers are humanitarians to begin with, so they're very much interested in bettering lives of human beings through beautiful work and that kind of design. But their training really goes back to the origins of modernism and to the Bauhaus, where design was about making really beautiful, functional, good design available to a large segment of society that could afford to pay for it. In other words, not just those who paid the $500 price for a lamp, but those who can only afford $20 for a lamp and can get a really beautiful lamp in their homes. And I think that historic context has informed a lot of architects being trained in modernism, which is everyone today. But I also think that it's a really interesting thing that it is the core sort of a concern of the design community, just as it is a core concern of humanity in general. I just think that people were, for the past few decades, people were really busy trying to do all the jobs that they got because there was so much work around. And now that there's more kind of less kind of big time work around, I think people are looking for other things to do and more satisfying things to do, and I think that has a lot to do with it too. But I also think that it does go all both ways. I mean, trends happen because human beings are in mass interested in something, and let's not forget that we have a political moment here in Washington where community service is very much part of the ethos of our central government right now. So I think that also helps inform our thinking as a society.
I think that's very true, especially with the community service. That's very interesting. Well, that brings me to the next point of since it's how maybe with what's going on in Washington right now as well, what are the different ways or the best ways to raise awareness of this trend and draw others into it as well. Barb, how would you suggest increasing awareness?
Well, I think that the points both Dana and Susan made about, there's kind of a big cultural shift going on. And for example, a little bit to what Susan was saying, a lot of people in the architecture and design profession are unemployed right now. And I think that they're really taking a step back and really thinking about, the meaning of their work, and that they, want to do something that's more satisfying at the end of the day. And I also think that it has to do with, everything that's been happening around us, like natural disasters, for example, tsunami, Katrina, Haiti now, or what's happening with the oil spill. People are looking at sustainability and different ways to design, because I think there's a concern about what's happening to the planet. There's also things like 9/11, especially in this country. I think that really changed, the way people thought about their world. It kind of shattered in a second. And for example, we noticed after 9/11 that our newsletter membership quadrupled. After Haiti, we went from like 4,000 followers on Twitter to 10,000 followers on Twitter. I think it's also because, in this world, it's becoming a little bit smaller through technology and globalization, and news travels faster, and we find out about, other things that are going on in the world a lot faster, and we kind of have a more intimate look at what's going on. Just to add, from a personal perspective, I grew up in Mexico, and, I looked at the environment around me and realized that, a lot of improvement needed to happen. And, through working with community groups and community organizing, I really understood why, it's important to have communities be part of the process and participate. Because if you really want to create change in communities, then community members have to be stakeholders. And then, going through architecture school, I studied architecture because I want to have a hand in changing, the world. But I didn't want to go through the normal avenue of, maybe interning at an architecture firm and doing AutoCAD work, and then hopefully maybe one day I would be involved in the interesting projects and the projects that I want to be part of. So I took a different route and, found Architecture for Humanity, for example, where I could be involved at that level with, the little experience that I had. And I think that we see that a lot with other volunteers and other people that want to participate in Architecture for Humanity, that, they're not interested in necessarily designing high-rise buildings all the time anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to add something about raising awareness, because obviously I'm with the media, so I can talk a little bit about that. But I really do feel that where there is a human issue that is solved by design thinking and design ideas, that is a real story of humanity and designers collaborating with those who need their input into making either a community center or making a school better or creating a playground or something locally important, that I think it would be really important for those designers to be aware that there are stories of these things, and the design element needs to be part of the storytelling. And I think usually, many times, when projects like that happen, it gets picked up in the local paper or on blogs or somewhere else, and they do a really great job in telling the story of the community, but then the design gets left out. So I think there needs to be an effort on the part of the design community to understand that its contribution should be part of the dialogue, and that design does solve a lot of problems beautifully. And that message has not yet gotten out in a really interesting way. So I think it's really important for all of us to think about how we do that and how we get the word out that humanitarian design is really just good design. It's not